Hey, what's up guys, Combat Critic here. In this video, let's take a look at Neil Magny, who is replacing Geoff Neal against Ian Machado Garry. Let's get started. If we take a look at the records of these two guys, starting with Neil Magny. So Neil has 38 fights in total. He's won 28 of his 38 fights and lost 10. If we talk about his 28 wins, he has 7 wins via knockout, 4 wins via submission, and 17 wins via decision. So most of his wins have come via decision. Whereas if we talk about his losses, he has 2 losses via knockout, 6 via sub, and another 2 losses via decision. Now let's take a look at Ian Garry's record. So Ian has 12 fights, so significantly lesser experience than Neil Magny, and he's won all 12 fights. If we talk about his wins, he has 7 wins via knockout, 1 via submission, and 4 via decision. So he is a striker and he is a knockout guy. You can infer that from his record. Now let's talk about the physical and career stats of both these guys. Starting with the height, it is 6 feet 3 inches for Neil Magny and it is also 6'3" for Ian Garry. The weight, so this fight is scheduled at welterweight. And if we talk about the reach, so Neil Magny has a huge reach of 80 inches and Ian Garry has a reach of 74 inches. So a huge 6-inch reach advantage goes to Neil Magny. If we talk about the stance, both these guys are orthodox stance fighters. And if we talk about the age, so Neil Magny is the older fighter. He is around 35-36 years old, whereas Ian Garry is very young. He is about to hit his prime. Now let's take a look at the career stats of both these guys, starting with the striking numbers. First metric we have is the strikes landed per minute. So this signifies the number of significant strikes that you land on your opponent per minute. This is 3.52 for Neil Magny and it is 6.85, very high for Ian Garry. Keep in mind that Ian has not had a lot of UFC fights, so these stats can be deceiving considering that he has not faced a lot of top high caliber guys in the UFC, except for maybe Daniel Rodriguez. Next up, we have the striking accuracy. So striking accuracy is 46% for Neil Magny and it is 55% for Ian Garry. So in both these metrics, we see that Ian is having the advantage. He is landing a lot more strikes as well as he is more accurate with his strikes. Next up, we have the strikes absorbed per minute. This signifies the number of strikes that you absorb per minute from your opponent. This is 2.25 for Neil Magny. In this case, you want this number to be as low as possible. And for Ian, this is 4.09. He gets hit quite often. So here the advantage goes to Neil Magny. Striking defense, however, is 54% for Neil Magny and 53%. So both these guys are pretty even when it comes to the striking defense. A very slight advantage can be given to Neil Magny. He is slightly better with his defense. Now let's talk about the wrestling, grappling and BJJ statistics, starting with the takedown average. So takedown average is 2.3 for Neil Magny and this can be a key factor in deciding whether he wins this fight or not. If we talk about Neil Magny, his takedown average is just 0.29. So Neil Magny will have an advantage here. Takedown accuracy is 41% for Neil Magny and 50% for Ian Garry. So here the advantage goes to Ian. He is more accurate with his takedowns. Takedown defense on the other hand is 56% for Neil Magny and 63% for Ian Garry. So Ian Garry is having a good takedown defense. Submission average is 0.3 for Neil Magny and it is 0 for Ian Garry. Ian Garry has never attempted a submission in the UFC so far. So a slight advantage goes to Neil Magny, even though Neil is not a submission guy, he is also a striker. Now let's take a look at the significant strikes by position. If we talk about Neil Magny, 59% of all his strikes are in the standing position, 20% are in the clinch and 22% are on the ground. Compare this with Ian Garry, who has 91% of all the strikes from the standing position, just 3% in the clinch and just 6% on the ground. So he is pretty much standing the entire fight. very little offense from the clinch or on the ground. Now let's take a look at the significant strikes by target. So 70% of all the strikes that Neil Magny throws are to the head, 20% to the body, and 10% to the leg. Whereas if we talk about Ian Garry, 60%, 62% of all his strikes are to the head, 21% are to the body, and 17% to the leg. So Ian Garry uses leg kicks more in his game compared to Neil Magny. Now let's talk about some of the previous performances of these two guys, starting with Neil Magny. So Neil in his last fight beat Philip Rowe via split decision in a 3-round fight. This fight happened in June of this year, so he's not taking a lot of time off. This is a short notice fight for him. He is replacing Geoff Neal, and this might be a big factor in this fight because Ian Garry is coming with a full camp behind him. If we talk about the fight before that, Neil Magny lost to Gilbert Burns in the first round via arm triangle choke. This fight happened in January of this year, so he has been pretty active in recent times. If we talk about the fight before that, Neil Magny beat Daniel Rodriguez via darts choke in the third round. This fight happened in November of last year. Before that, he lost to Shavkat via guillotine choke in the second round. And before that, he beat Max Griffin via split decision, Geoff Neal via unanimous decision, and lost to Michael Chiesa back in 2021 in a 5-round main event. And before that, he beat washed up Robbie Lawler. He beat Anthony Rocco Martin via unanimous decision, and he also beat Lee Jingliang via unanimous decision. He lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio via knockout. This happened in November of 2018, and this is the most recent KO loss that he has on his record. Now let's take a look at Ian Garry's record. So Ian Garry in his last fight finished Daniel Rodriguez in the first round via head kick and punches. This was a great win for Ian Garry, and before that he beat Song Keenan via TKO punches in the third round. He beat Gabriel Green via unanimous decision, Darian Weeks also via unanimous decision, and Jordan Williams in his UFC debut via knockout in the very first round. So he's not had a lot of UFC experience. However, he is the younger guy and he has more knockouts on his record. As we have seen, he is the more powerful guy, and for these reasons, if I have to pick a winner, I'm gonna go with Ian Garry. I believe he is the younger fighter. He has a full training camp behind it, whereas Neil Magny is taking this fight on a short notice, and he is the older fighter. He has not had a lot of success with his punches so far, in the sense that he has not won a lot of fights via knockout in recent memory. Most of his wins have come via decision. I think for these reasons, Ian Garry should win this fight. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video.